Imagine a man chained at the edge of a boiling cauldron, the bubbles of the scalding liquid touching his feet, every moment bringing him closer to death. His screams echo through the air while spectators watch in fear and amazement. If you want to know how this horrifying punishment was carried out, and how Henry VIII's life was intertwined with power, fear, and blood, make sure to watch this video until the very end. Let's begin with the story of Henry VIII, a king whose fear and thirst for power left an indelible mark on history. During the early years of Henry VIII's life, the fear and insecurity in his mind would later become evident in the laws and decrees he enforced. Within the palace, anyone, no matter how loyal, could at any moment be perceived as a threat to the king. This fear and intoxication with power led Henry to create a law that would stand as a unique example in history: the punishment of being boiled alive. This law originated from a particular incident when John Fisher, then the Bishop of Rochester, accused his cook Richard Rouse of poisoning a porridge. This porridge, intended for charity, killed not only the bishop's household members, but also the poor people who were consuming the food. Henry VIII considered this incident a personal attack, because if a mere cook could harm a religious figure, a royal cook could at any moment extinguish the king's life. The king immediately declared this crime as high treason and introduced a punishment that would be remembered as one of the most horrifying and savage in history: executing a person by boiling them alive. In the infamous London square of Smithfield, a massive cauldron was prepared to carry out this punishment. It was filled with water, oil, or sometimes molten lead, and a fire of blazing logs burned beneath, so intense that its heat could be felt for miles. Richard Rouse was chained and slowly lowered into the cauldron by the executioners, prolonging the agonizing struggle between life and death. Each time he was pulled out to take a short breath, he was thrown back in, extending his torment. His skin began to blister and peel, flesh separating from the bones, while blood mixed with the boiling liquid, creating a ghastly color. The spectators watched in horror and fascination, understanding that this was not only punishment, but also a demonstration of the state's power. The agony continued for hours until Richard Rouse's heart and internal organs were destroyed by the heat, and he finally succumbed to death. In 1542, another victim, a maid named Margaret Davy, suffered the same fate. These events made it clear that Henry VIII's law showed no mercy for anyone. Within the palace, every servant, minister, and soldier lived in constant fear, knowing that the king's wrath could strike at any moment. Towards the end of his life, Henry VIII's health deteriorated. Obesity, ulcers, and wounds plagued his body, making it nearly impossible for his servants to be near him. His physical weakness only intensified the grip of his fear and power. When he died in 1547, his 9-year-old son Edward VI ascended the throne. During Edward's reign, early concepts of human rights began to emerge, and Parliament completely abolished this horrific punishment. Although the punishment ended in England, in some parts of Europe, especially Germany and France, it was still used for counterfeiters, as forging coins was seen as an economic threat to the state. By the end of the 17th century, the emerging ideas of human rights permanently ended this brutality. This shows how intoxication with power and fear for survival can make a person extremely ruthless. Henry VIII, in his obsession with fear and control, devalued human life to less than a boiling cauldron. The screams of Richard Rouse and Margaret Davy are now silent, but the bubbling cauldron still testifies to how power can drive a human being to unimaginable cruelty. Henry VIII's story reminds us that the combination of power, fear, and personal ego can destroy human life, and history teaches us the importance of balancing authority with justice. Henry VIII was born on June 28, 1491, to King Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. His father, Henry VII, was a hard-working and politically shrewd king who seized the throne after a long civil war between the houses of York and Lancaster. His reign was strong, yet always shadowed by fear, as clever enemies and claimants to the throne constantly threatened it. Henry VIII learned the complexities of power, politics, and fear from his father. And as a young man, he understood that ruling the throne required not just strength, but cunning and decisiveness. He had several siblings, and within the palace, every relationship was entangled with politics and personal interest. The strict principles of his father placed immense expectations and responsibilities on young Henry. His education included physical training, swordsmanship, hunting, and political strategy. As he grew, he became strong, intelligent, and confident, but also proud and sometimes reckless. Henry VIII ascended the throne on April 21, 1509, upon his father's death. For the young king, it was a new beginning, but he immediately faced political and religious challenges. The biggest issue was England's relationship with the Catholic Church. Powerful European nations, including France and Spain, constantly interfered in England's internal affairs. Every step was a potential danger, requiring both political and personal vigilance. Henry used marriages to consolidate power. His first marriage was to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess. Though it was politically strategic, personal coldness and conflict soon arose. This marriage later became a catalyst for both his reputation and religious conflict, as Henry sought to separate from his wife and challenge the church. Henry VIII's personality was complex. He was powerful, but also ruled under fear, jealousy, and psychological pressure. He constantly feared that anyone in the palace, no matter how loyal, could betray him at any moment. Servants, ministers, and soldiers were always cautious, as any misstep could provoke his wrath, and his decisions were swift and severe. His 6 marriages and children played crucial roles in his life. Each marriage affected him politically and personally, and each child became both a treasure and a potential source of conflict. Protecting his sons and daughters and securing their futures was a constant struggle, and every marriage decision had to balance personal desire and state interest. Henry fought many wars during his reign, winning some and losing others. Conflicts with France and Scandinavia were constant. Despite England's military strength, he faced internal conspiracies and political threats. Every victory and defeat taught him lessons, while each failure intensified his fears. Within the palace, rules and hierarchy were strict. Servants, soldiers, ministers, and cooks knew their place, but fear kept everyone cautious. Even minor disputes drew the king's attention, and his judgments were harsh and sometimes merciless. Henry VIII's story demonstrates how power, fear, and personal ego can destroy human life. The punishment he imposed, like boiling people alive, reflects the extreme consequences of unchecked authority. His life, the screams of his victims, and the terror he instilled continue to teach us about the delicate balance between justice and power.